Hello, how do you do? It's good to see you since last week, and last week was kind of a longer visit. I think this week will be a little bit shorter, a little bit more like our normal length. But it's good to see you again. What I'd like to do this evening, as we talked briefly about, is I'd like to give you kind of a book recommendation and interact with that a little bit. And then we will also still read. I have a poem I'd like to share with you. Actually, this time, again, of my own composition. I don't think I've shared this with you before. So let's get on to it, I suppose. The book that I recommend is one that I'm currently reading. I'm almost done with it. So I do feel that I can recommend it and know that pretty confidently. But this book is The Quest for Shakespeare by Joseph Pearce. Joseph Pearce he's an author of several biographies. He's written really extensively. Most of, I think, the writing he does is articles. He'll write for different blogs or subscriptions, things like that. He's a very good writer. He's a lot of fun to read, because you can tell in his writing all of the books that he's read come out in the way he writes. So constantly he'll make an offhand remark, which is an allusion to Dickens or to Dante or Belloc or Chesterton or something like that. So it's very interesting. He has a very wide treasury of quotations and sentiments and vocabulary as well. So he's a lot of fun to just read. The Quest for Shakespeare, his book, is subtitled The Bard of Avon and the Church of Rome. So he goes through Joseph Pearce's Catholic, and he goes through the evidence for what he really wants to interact with, and he says this at the beginning of the book. What he really wants to interact with is if there is any, and what Christian theology is present in Shakespeare's plays. He really wants to understand, okay, what is Shakespeare getting at? He's writing at this really tumultuous time in England's history. And so he wants to analyze the plays themselves, but he says, well, hold on. First, what we have to do is we have to understand Shakespeare. Because it wouldn't make sense to say, Shakespeare, Hamlet has all of this really interesting, kind of under the radar, Catholic theology or atheistic philosophy if, Shakespeare was an atheist or agnostic or, was he an Anglican in the strict sense? Was he this recusant Catholic? How can we understand the deeper meaning of the plays if we don't understand the spring from which those flow? So in this book, he has another book that I'd also like to read that deals with the plays specifically, but this book interacts with Shakespeare, the person, and what we know about his life, what we know about his family, and he gives a good defense, a really good common sense defense for, for one of the examples he gives is John Shakespeare, William's father, he is constantly throughout his life is listed on recusant lists in the local parish in Stratford. And Shakespeare's mother's family was known to be and always was a staunch recusant family. The woman, Anne Hathaway, that William marries comes from the Ardens, who were known recusants. And then Shakespeare's children, I think one of his daughters, Susanna, I think he had 3 children. Hamnet, who of course dies, I think when he was a boy, his only son, and then he has 2 daughters, Susanna and Judith. Susanna shows up later in life on the local recusant list in Stratford as well. And so he kind of takes all these facts that we know about Shakespeare or the people around Shakespeare and says, with what level of confidence can we say, what bearing those facts have on Shakespeare himself, when he makes certain moves, like when he moves from Stratford to London, does he ever come back? How often? He takes all of that into account, and because we know really much less about Shakespeare than we would like, a lot of it has to be reading between the lines. It's very well founded. I was kind of struck with, I kind of started reading it from a skeptical point of view. I mean, of course, everyone wants to be able to claim the bard for their team. So it'd be, in one sense, it'd be great if Shakespeare were Catholic, because, hey, I'm Catholic, that's awesome. But also, I just kind of personally start from, like, okay, well, like, that'd be nice, but probably, like, I was pretty skeptical about it. And the way he establishes a lot of his conclusions are very interesting. It's almost kind of like detective work, going through and saying, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened. Shakespeare does this. Well, why is he doing it? And so looking at motives, and it's very, very interesting. So I encourage you to read it. Again, the goal of this book is the next book, which deals with, okay, how, what's some of the substructure in the plays, which I had said last visit that I'm probably going to be reading more Shakespeare this year. So I'm interested to read this. I think that this book, I'm interested to read the next book that Joseph Pearce wrote on kind of this subject. So this is my recommendation. I recommend that to you. And the poem that I'd like to share is not related to Shakespeare. We did that last week with Richard II's soliloquy. But this is a poem of my own composition. The working title I have right now is Humbled at Cana. And this is, I had this, like I've said before, I had like this line kind of get stuck in my head. And so, of course, this poem got built and written around that line, which is, I think it's Alexander Pope, who, wrote, about the Jesus turning water into wine at Cana, at the wedding at Cana. I think he said something to the effect of, the conscious water saw its creator and blushed, in describing the miracle itself. So this poem is written on that topic, and it's written, the first several lines are written from the perspective of water personified, and then the last two lines you'll recall from Pope's lines. So just listen to this. From depths profound I was drawn, and made to quench some human thirst. From mighty mountain springs I spawn, and gather from the rainfall skirt. Amidst the thunder god's applause I fall to just and evil earth. I swell in silver waves, and cause all life to grow, and some their dearth. I was there where the Spirit stayed, before the Logos spoke his laws. Over the sky and sun god rayed the stars and moonlight's dewy gloss. I cleanse all lands and feed at will, I hold Leviathan below. Art thou enough now strong with skill to ward off my almighty blow? No, nay, in stoneware vessels sing my praise, or 'neath a surging flood I'll crush. Then an ellipsis happens. Beheld by her creator's gaze, the proud and wrathful water blushed. So that was fun. It was fun to write that. Again, it's obviously the last two lines are a nod to Pope, but the idea of water being personified and yelling and being wrathful, and think of the waves on the sea or something like that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. It was nice to see you again, and I look forward to our next visit. Until next time, bye.